Welcome to the History AI podcast, where the past comes alive with facts, anecdotes, and a dash of humor. Here are your hosts, Chuck and Marco.
Welcome to the History AI podcast, everyone. I'm Chuck.
And I'm Marco. Today we're diving into a dark chapter of history, Unit 731. This isn't just a story of war, it's a chilling chronicle of human experimentation.
It's heavy stuff, but it's important not to shy away from these parts of history. We'll explore the global scene, the events, and the lasting impact. And we'll try to lighten the mood here and there, though fair warning, today's topic is quite grim.
Definitely, Chuck. But before we get into it, a quick reminder that our episodes are evergreen, meaning whenever you listen, there's something new to learn. Don't forget to rate, subscribe, and share to help us grow. Now, let's set the scene.
Let's take a step back to the early 20th century. The world is navigating through turbulent waters, the Roaring Twenties have crashed into the Great Depression, economies are in shambles, and political unrest is brewing in many corners of the globe.
Exactly, Chuck. And it's against this backdrop of economic despair and growing nationalism that Japan begins to assert its imperial ambitions. The 1931 invasion of Manchuria marks the start of Japanese expansionism in Asia, setting the stage for further conflicts.
That's right, Marco. Japan's actions in Manchuria aren't just about territorial gain, they're part of a broader strategy to dominate Asia. This is where Unit 731 comes into play. Officially formed in 1936, it's nestled within the puppet state of Manchukuo, in Japanese-occupied China.
The location is strategic, far from the prying eyes of international communities and surrounded by areas densely populated enough to provide a steady supply of human subjects for their ghastly experiments. The remoteness also means that the details of what happened there remain obscured and controlled by the Japanese military.
Under the command of Shiro Ishii, Unit 731 is disguised as a water purification unit, but its real purpose is far more sinister. Ishii, who has a background in microbiology, secures support from the highest levels of the Japanese government and military for his projects, reflecting a chilling alignment of scientific inquiry and military strategy.
Their primary aim? Develop biological weapons and conduct experiments on human subjects to test these weapons and other horrific medical procedures. As we'll see, the scale and impunity of the operations at Unit 731 are unlike anything else in the annals of military history.
It's a dark chapter indeed. But understanding the geopolitical and social conditions that allowed such a unit to exist is crucial for our discussion today. It sheds light not only on the actions themselves but also on the international response, or lack thereof, that followed. At the helm of Unit 731 was Shiro Ishii, a figure whose ambition and ruthlessness were matched only by the backing he received from the Japanese military elite. Ishii, a distinguished microbiologist and a lieutenant general in the Imperial Japanese Army, spearheaded the unit's creation and its sinister operations.
Ishii wasn't working in isolation. He had a team of scientists, doctors, biologists, and chemists, all recruited from Japan's top universities. Many were promised rapid career advancement, and disturbingly, the secrecy and lack of ethical oversight in Unit 731 allowed them to push the boundaries of medical science without regard for human suffering.
The objectives of Unit 731 were chillingly clear: develop biological weapons capable of killing thousands of people efficiently and test the limits of the human body to understand better how different diseases and injuries would affect soldiers in combat. This wasn't about curing diseases but weaponizing them.
They were specifically interested in plague, anthrax, cholera, and other pathogens that could be used to devastating effect on battlefields or against civilian populations. The research also extended to physiological experiments, such as determining how long it would take for a person to die from dehydration, hypothermia, or blood loss.
Beyond the scientists and military personnel, there were also thousands of victims, referred to as logs by the unit to dehumanize them. These included Chinese civilians, prisoners of war from the Soviet Union, Korea, Mongolia, and some Allied POWs. The scope and scale of these experiments were unprecedented.
It's also important to note the institutional support this unit received. The Japanese government and military not only funded and protected Ishii and his team but also facilitated their activities by building infrastructure and providing human subjects, showcasing a horrifying complicity at every level of authority.
With these objectives and the personnel involved, Unit 731 operated under a veil of secrecy that was meant to shield them from both the eyes of the international community and the moral scrutiny that would eventually come after the war. The experiments conducted by Unit 731 are among the most horrific atrocities in human history. Under the guise of scientific research, these experiments on human subjects were brutal and devoid of any ethical consideration.
Absolutely, Chuck. The types of experiments can be broadly categorized into several disturbing groups. First, there were pathogen experiments. Scientists deliberately infected prisoners with deadly diseases like plague, anthrax, cholera, and syphilis to study the effects and to develop possible biological weapons.
Then there were the vivisection experiments. Prisoners, often still alive, were cut open without anesthesia so that researchers could observe the effects of various diseases on internal organs. These procedures were done without any pain relief, and the subjects were fully conscious to ensure that the decay or damage caused by diseases could be examined in real time.
There were also experiments related to weapon testing, such as exposing victims to phosphorus and mustard gas to study burn patterns and respiratory damage. They also tested the limits of human endurance, subjecting people to extreme pressures, temperatures, and radiation to see how much the human body could withstand before failing.
Other experiments involved frostbite testing, where limbs were exposed to freezing temperatures until gangrene set in, and then the decayed parts were amputated methodically to study blood loss and shock. The unit also conducted blood transfusion experiments, often swapping blood between prisoners of different races to observe reactions.
And let's not forget the food and water deprivation experiments, designed to determine how long it would take for a person to die from starvation or dehydration. These tests were marked by a callous indifference to suffering and a complete disregard for human life.
It's also crucial to highlight the scale of these experiments. Unit 731 wasn't a small, isolated program. It involved thousands of victims and a large team of researchers. The systematic nature of these tests speaks to a broader institutional failure and moral bankruptcy within the military and scientific communities involved.
The data gleaned from these gruesome experiments was intended for developing effective biological warfare agents and survival strategies for Japanese soldiers. The human cost, however, was unimaginable, with countless lives lost and many more permanently scarred by the atrocities committed.
These experiments highlight a dark intersection of science and war, where the pursuit of knowledge and military advantage eclipsed all semblance of humanity and ethics. As we reflect on these events, it's crucial to remember the victims and the unimaginable horrors they endured. Despite the grim nature of our topic today, there are glimmers of resilience and bravery that shine through the darkness of Unit 731's history. These stories of resistance and heroism provide a stark contrast to the atrocities committed.
One such example comes from the local Chinese population, who were often the victims of Unit 731's experiments. Despite the heavy surveillance and the dire consequences of defiance, there were instances of sabotage within the facilities and escape attempts by some prisoners. These acts of resistance were incredibly risky but underscored a profound human spirit fighting against oppression.
Indeed, Marco. There's the story of a young Chinese woman, known only by her first name, Yu. She was forcibly taken to Unit 731's facilities but managed to escape during a transfer between compounds. Yu's subsequent efforts to alert local villagers and resistance fighters helped save countless lives by providing crucial information about the Japanese operations in the area.
And let's not forget the moral courage shown by some of the Japanese personnel themselves. One Japanese army medic, who remains anonymous in historical records, secretly documented the experiments and later provided these records to Allied forces, despite the immense personal risk of retribution from his own government.
There were also acts of solidarity and covert help provided by local Chinese doctors who were forced to work in the camps. They often risked their lives to give minimal treatments to the prisoners or to smuggle out messages, and sometimes even small groups of prisoners during staged blackouts or other chaotic events.
Beyond these individual acts of heroism, there were broader efforts by resistance movements in China and Korea. These groups gathered intelligence, staged raids when possible, and worked with Allied forces to report on the atrocities. Their contributions were crucial in eventually bringing some of the details of Unit 731 to light, albeit much later.
These stories of resistance and heroism are vital not just for their historical value but for their demonstration of human resilience and the capacity to fight against overwhelming odds. They remind us that even in the darkest times, there are always those who will stand up for what is right.
Absolutely, Chuck. It's these narratives that inspire us and remind us of the strength and bravery that individuals are capable of, even in the face of such horrific circumstances. It's crucial we remember and honor these acts as we recount the history of Unit 731.
The human cost of Unit 731's operations is almost unimaginable. The brutality and scale of the casualties inflicted by these experiments are difficult to fully quantify, but they leave a lasting mark on history.
Indeed, Chuck. The number of victims varies widely in reports, with estimates ranging from tens of thousands to over 200,000. The majority of these victims were Chinese civilians, including women and children, which underscores the sheer disregard for human life exhibited by Unit 731.
The methods of inflicting harm were diverse and all equally horrifying. Victims were subjected to gunshots and bomb blasts just to test treatment methods for injuries. Others were deprived of food and water to determine the length of time until death, a process that was excruciating and prolonged.
Many were exposed to lethal doses of X-rays, placed in centrifuges until death, or subjected to various chemical and biological agents to observe their fatal effects. These experiments weren't just about observing immediate effects, but also understanding the prolonged suffering these agents could cause.
And let's not forget the biological warfare trials. Unit 731 released pathogens like typhoid and plague through fleas and distributed contaminated food and water to Chinese populations, resulting in large-scale outbreaks and thousands of deaths. These were not controlled lab experiments, these were war crimes on a massive scale.
The brutal efficiency with which these experiments were conducted shows a chilling level of premeditation. Bodies were disposed of through cremation, and records were meticulously kept then later destroyed as the war ended, making it difficult to trace the full extent of the atrocities.
The impact of these actions extended beyond the immediate physical effects on victims. The psychological and social repercussions for the families and communities affected by these experiments are profound and ongoing. The trauma has been passed down through generations, affecting survivors and their descendants.
Moreover, the environmental impact due to the release of pathogens and chemicals has had lasting effects on the regions where these activities took place, contributing to long-term health problems and ecological damage that persisted decades after the war.
The scale of brutality and the high number of casualties make Unit 731 one of the most horrific chapters in the history of warfare. It's a stark reminder of the depths of cruelty that can arise during armed conflicts, especially when unchecked by any legal or ethical constraints.
Absolutely, Chuck. The story of Unit 731 is not just a historical lesson, it's a call to remember and recognize the suffering of the victims and ensure such atrocities are never repeated.
The reaction of the world to the revelations about Unit 731 is a complex and somewhat disheartening chapter in the aftermath of World War II. Initially, the full extent of what had happened in the secretive confines of Unit 731 was not widely known outside of Japan and certain circles within the Allied powers.
That's right, Chuck. When the war ended, the Soviet Union was the first to act, conducting the Khabarovsk war crime trials in 1949. They tried and convicted a dozen Japanese military personnel associated with Unit 731. However, these trials did not gain as much international attention as the Nuremberg trials in Europe.
Meanwhile, in the United States and among other Allied nations, a different approach was taken, one that has since sparked significant controversy. Instead of bringing Japanese scientists to public trial, U.S. authorities secretly granted immunity to Shiro Ishii and other Unit 731 members in exchange for their data on biological warfare.
This data was deemed incredibly valuable in the burgeoning Cold War context, reflecting a grim realpolitik. The US feared that the Soviet Union would also capture and utilize this data, leading to a race not just for nuclear but biological supremacy as well. As a result, many details about Unit 731 only came to light decades later, and the full scope of the atrocities remained under wraps.
Within Japan, post-war chaos and the U.S. occupation led to a suppression of information about war crimes, including those committed by Unit 731. Japanese textbooks and public discussions for many years barely touched on these aspects, or they frame the activities in misleadingly benign terms.
It wasn't until the 1980s and 1990s that a more significant public disclosure and discussion about Unit 731 emerged, both in Japan and internationally. This was driven by journalism, academic research, and the testimonies of survivors and former unit members who began to speak out.
The international legal and ethical implications have also been significant. The activities of Unit 731 have spurred debates and studies in medical ethics, the laws of war, and human rights. However, the lack of formal acknowledgement and reparation from the Japanese government to the victims continues to be a point of contention in international relations, especially with China and Korea.
Overall, the world's reaction to Unit 731 is a story of initial secrecy and later outrage, mixed with a sobering reflection on how geopolitical considerations can sometimes override the demands of justice and morality. It's a poignant reminder of the complexities and compromises that often accompany the aftermath of conflicts.
Indeed, Marco. The story of Unit 731 challenges us to think critically about the moral responsibilities of nations and the international community in the face of war crimes and human rights violations. The legacy of Unit 731 extends far beyond the immediate horrors it inflicted during its operation. The repercussions of these atrocities have rippled through decades, influencing international laws, medical ethics, and the collective memory of nations.
That's right, Chuck. On the legal and ethical fronts, the activities of Unit 731 have had a profound impact on how the world views and regulates wartime conduct and medical experimentation. The revelations about the unit spurred enhancements in the Geneva Conventions and the establishment of stricter international standards for the treatment of prisoners of war.
Moreover, the atrocities committed by Unit 731 played a crucial role in shaping the Nuremberg Code, which was established to govern the ethics of human experimentation. This code emphasizes the necessity of consent, the welfare of the subject, and the ethical considerations that must guide medical research, a direct counter to the practices seen in Unit 731.
However, the handling of the Unit 731 case also exposed significant flaws in the post-war justice system. The immunity granted to many of its members in exchange for data they collected, especially by the United States, has left a lasting stain on the narrative of justice and accountability in international conflicts. This decision has been heavily criticized and continues to fuel debates about moral and ethical decision-making in wartime scenarios.
Culturally, the impact of Unit 731 has been profound, especially in China and Korea, where it remains a poignant symbol of Japanese wartime aggression. The continued reluctance by some factions in Japan to fully acknowledge these atrocities has resulted in ongoing tension between these countries.
The story of Unit 731 also raises enduring questions about the balance between scientific inquiry and ethical boundaries. It serves as a grim reminder of the potential for science to be misused, emphasizing the need for ongoing vigilance to ensure that research practices remain ethical and are never dissociated from humanity.
And let's not overlook the personal impact on the survivors and the families of the victims. The psychological scars and the physical aftermath of the experiments have affected generations, creating a legacy of pain and suffering that is both deep and enduring.
Indeed, Chuck. The Unit 731 narrative is not just a historical relic but a living reminder of the dark potential of human endeavors when stripped of ethical considerations. It challenges us to remember, to learn, and to ensure that history does not repeat itself.
As we continue to reflect on the lessons of Unit 731, we recognize the importance of transparency, ethical governance, and the moral courage to confront and rectify past injustices. It's a difficult part of history, but it is crucial for building a more just and humane future.
Well said, Chuck. The lasting impact of Unit 731 goes beyond textbooks and legal documents. It touches the core of our understanding of human rights and the absolute necessity to safeguard them in all circumstances.
That brings us to the end of today's episode on Unit 731. This has been a challenging yet important topic, revealing the depths of human cruelty as well as the resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds.
As always, we appreciate you joining us on this historical journey. We hope that by bringing these stories to light, we contribute to a broader understanding and awareness of the past, helping to ensure that such atrocities are never repeated.
And remember, all our episodes are evergreen, meaning they remain relevant whenever you choose to listen. We believe that understanding history is a continuous process, and every episode we create is designed to add value to your understanding of the past, present, and future.
If you found today's episode enlightening or thought-provoking, please share it with others. Spreading knowledge is not just about sharing information, but about building a community that values historical awareness and ethical reflection.
Your support means the world to us. By sharing our episodes, you help us reach more people and keep these important conversations alive. Don't forget to rate and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and if you're feeling extra generous, drop us a 5-star review. It really helps.
And if you have topics you want us to explore or questions you'd like answered, reach out through social media. We're always eager to engage with our listeners and expand our content based on what you want to hear.
Check out the show notes for links to our social media, where you can suggest new topics, and don't forget to take a look at our new merchandise. Every purchase supports the podcast and keeps us going strong.
Thank you again for tuning in. I'm Marco.
And I'm Chuck. Until next time, keep the past alive by continuing to question, learn, and share. Stay curious, stay informed, and thank you for listening to the History AI Podcast. Looking for the perfect way to show appreciation for the incredible mom in your life? Discover Exhausted Moms, a coloring journey to relaxation and humor, the coloring book that speaks directly to the heart of motherhood. Gift her an escape into pages of laughter, empowerment, and moments of tranquility. With Exhausted Moms, she'll find a blend of whimsical illustrations and inspiring quotes that celebrate her daily triumphs and challenges. Crafted with love from images I created for the mother of my children, each page offers a space for creativity and relaxation, a reminder that she's doing an amazing job, even on the toughest days. Give the gift of laughter, peace, and recognition. Exhausted Moms isn't just a coloring book, it's a hug, a nod of understanding, and a token of appreciation for everything she does. Surprise her with Exhausted Moms today and watch her face light up with joy. Because every mom deserves a moment to herself, wrapped in the colors of love and support.